All right, so we have explored and experimented with a couple different types of pencils. We know the difference between the B and the H pencils, the soft and the hard leads. We've experimented with holding the pencil a couple different ways and adjusting the pressure to change the line type from a very thick line as we apply more pressure to a very thin line and broken line, or a line that almost disappears as we get a very light pressure. We've experimented with line direction, things like horizontal and vertical, and curved and jagged and spiral, all that kind of stuff, right? We're aware of how the pencil touches the paper in from different positions and how that can change the line type, whether using the tip of the pencil or the side of the pencil. So we have all that information, right? And we understand all that. Good basics, good foundation. And then we have also taken some time to look at our seashells, right? We've really explored and observed and really noticed all those little different details, the different lines and the different textures, all that visual information that we want to try and put into our drawings, right? So remember, drawing, the art of drawing is the art of seeing. If you can see it, you can draw it. So what we're going to do now is do a line drawing of our seashell. And after you've chosen your shell and you've taken some time to observe it and kind of, really noticed all those little details like we just discussed, then I want you to choose a position, because you don't want to be holding your seashell and you don't want to be like moving around so much that you kind of lose focus and you forget what you're looking at. So try and choose a position of your seashell that you can let it sit and stay there, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of make a little platform for my shell. I guess something like that. And I'm going to place it, let's see if that'll stay. Cool, that looks pretty good. Something like that. And then what you want to do to begin is draw a bounding box. Basically, it's a box that would fit the shape of your shell. Let me just make sure you can see that. So imagine if you were to draw a box around this whole shell in which all four sides of that box would be touching the shell. That's going to help you keep the correct proportion of your shell. So do that first. Visualize what that box would look like. Is it a true box, equal sides on all four? Or is it more of a rectangle? Is it a little bit longer in one direction? So think about that for a moment. And I think for this shell, it's a little bit longer from this perspective, in this position, this way. The width is a little bit longer than the height. So I'm going to draw a box. Let's see. Try to keep your lines light when you start. It's always easier to go back and make lines darker later after you're sure you want to keep them, versus having to erase something to lighten it. Erasing is always more difficult than going back and fixing just by darkening later on. So keep the lines light as possible in the beginning. Something like that looks okay. All right. Now I want to break the shell down into just its basic shapes. When I look at this, I kind of think about, maybe a geometric shape. What geometric shape might that shell fit into? And it kind of looks like maybe a diamond to me. Maybe you'd say a circle, but I see more, some more angles in here. Maybe like a diamond or a square that's on its, been kind of turned 90 degrees. 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of a shape. So maybe something 1, 2, 3, something like that. So break it down first into, it's the basic geometric shape that you can kind of, you can see. Its most simplest form, its most simplest shape. And then from there, what you're gonna do is make it look a little bit more true to what you see. Add in some more realistic lines, still keeping them light. So something like that. Okay. Now, if you're happy with what you see, then you can start to darken a little bit, make it a little bit more of a commitment to those lines. Not too dark, but just so you can kind of see the lines that you want to keep, and you know which lines you want to keep and which ones are just kind of experimental, kind of creating the structure, you know, blueprinting your drawing. So your blueprint lines keep light. The lines that you want to really keep, you can go in darken a little bit. So I'm going for something like that. Maybe this could be a little bit more rounded up here, so there we go. Now, this lesson, what I want you guys to be focusing on is applying line types, using those different lines you've experimented with, adjusting the pencil pressure to change those lines, and then being aware of form, right? Being aware not just of the shape of the shell, but the actual form of the shell and how we used different types of lines to create that illusion of form. So when I look at this shell, I see form created in two ways. One, there's the curved lines of that kind of this graded texture that goes across the seashell, that very quintessential seashell, that clamshell that has those lines going across. Those lines are not just straight. They're not just straight, but they're curving from the back of the shell up, over, and down again. So I want to be aware of that as I kind of add some of those lines into my drawing. They're curving. And again, I'm just starting off light. And I notice too that they're much tighter over here, closer together, and then they spread out as they get to the other side of the shell. So a little bit tighter to begin, and then they spread out. Now I'm not trying to draw every single line that I see, because sometimes you want to leave something to the viewer's imagination. A little bit of missing detail gives the viewer's eye something to fill in on their own, and that is actually more interesting at times. So you have to be the artist here and decide which lines you want to really focus on and which lines you feel like you can omit. Another thing that's going to make this shell have form, that illusion of depth, is not just the curved lines, but also how I capture tone. Now, tone is the light and dark in our drawings, the shadow and the highlights. So I have a light source that's shining from this direction here. This is the direction of light. So there's a cast shadow on the opposite side. With these lines here that I was kind of drawing, with these marks, this textured surface, the side closest to where the light's coming from is capturing that light. So there's gonna be a little bit of a highlight on that edge. The side opposite over here is going to have a little bit of shadow on it. Just like we see the shadow down here, and there's a highlight over here. The same thing applies to each one of these little ribs of texture. There's a highlight, a shadow, highlight, shadow, highlight, shadow. So I want to be aware of that in my drawings as well. So right now, I don't want you guys to be doing any shading, really. This is shading when we're using kind of the side of the pencil. I want you guys really thinking about just using lines and how you can use line to kind of create that tone. So maybe what I would do, let's say, I might darken one side a little bit. So just by applying more pressure conveys the sense of darker tone or shadow, right? And since we also recognize that this is ribbed, right? So it's a low area, then a higher area, low area, higher area. I might add in some curved lines in here. All right, line types, exploring different types of line. Curved line in there, curved line in here, all right? So if this is where the shadow is on this side, maybe that curved line comes up a little bit. Comes up a little bit over here too. Okay. Noticing that detail in that shell. If you can see it, you can draw it, right? Now these lines, you can see they don't go all the way across the shell. I mean, they kind of do, but we have some other kind of texture that's being built up. The shell's a little bit old and it's, I don't know if that's barnacles or what, but it's got some other things going on the surface. So I don't want to be just drawing lines and only focusing on that shape that we see, that really traditional shape. I want to pick out that other detail too, right? So maybe in this area here, I might have some of this texture kind of going on. So I'm going to change my lines to something a little bit more organic, smaller, little detailed marks. Maybe over here, I have some more over here. I can pop over there for a second. Again, if you can see it, you can draw it, all right? As you work through your drawing and you pull out the detail that you want to include in your artwork, go ahead and start committing your lines, making your lines a little bit darker where you need to. Again, the side that's going to be in the shadow, the side opposite the directed light, you can make those lines a little bit more dark, a little bit more bold, all right? Under here, we have a lot of shadow, so I might use a little bit of hatching under here. If you want to draw some of the shadow, that's fine too. In fact, what I'm going to do is a little cross hatching in here, following the form of that shell. Over here, we had this more textured detail, so I might add in You see, I'm not shading there to make that darker area. I'm just adding some hatching. Over here, maybe some lighter hatching. Okay, so this is what I want you to be aware of as you're working on your drawing. I'm not going to go through the whole thing right now, but this is enough to get you started. So be aware of, again, how you're holding the pencil, your pencil pressure, starting off light with your drawing, with your lines, and then as you are happy with the lines you're making, then you can commit to darker lines. And be sure you're using line variety by adjusting that pressure and then thinking about what type of lines you're actually making. Are they long lines, right? Are these long lines? Are they curved lines? Are they straight lines? Are they lines that are solid? Or are they kind of broken where they start to disappear and then start again, right? Maybe as you do that, as you make a line that kind of disappears and then reappears, that's showing an area of highlight, or maybe you have some of that light reflecting off of it. So these are the things I want you to be thinking about. And then lastly, with that tone, don't do the shading. We don't want to see shading. Use hatching, right? Lines that are parallel to one another, or cross hatching if you want to go even darker to convey the tone. And then try to see if you can follow the form of the shell as you're doing that hatching, all right? So experiment with that, you guys. Good observations. If you can see it, you can draw it. Have fun.